Hey, it's Kevin Hart with my pal Catherine O'Hara.
No, I'm more of a bestie.
Kinda, sorta. Right now, we're cash backing on everything we need for the holidays with Chase Freedom Unlimited.
I got some ornaments and lights.
'Tis the season to cash back.
And lots of wrapping paper.
Maybe you're cash backing on a present bought for me?
About that.
I know you're kidding.
Am I?
How do you cash back? Learn more at chasefreedom.com. Chase, make more of what's yours.
Restrictions and limitations apply. Cards are issued by JPMorgan Chase Bank and a member FDIC.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Final Four is Not on the Schedule. I'm your host Eric, alongside with expert analyst Rod. Thanks for joining us on the best MSU basketball podcast featuring in-depth recruiting, game matchup, and post-game analysis. We dive deep to give you the best tools to enjoy the Spartans and impress your friends and family. Hey everybody, Eric alongside Rod here. We're going to discuss the post-game for the 63-70 loss by Michigan State to the Northwestern Wildcats in the Big Ten opener at the Breslin Center. A disappointing start to the season, obviously, for the Big Ten Marks. Everything was done with Christmas. I was pretty excited. All the decorations are up, Rod. And then on our way to the game, my wife said, I'm just not going to bother getting Michigan State gear on. I'm just going to stay sort of the clothes I had on. And she said, if they lose, you can blame me. So we can all blame my wife for what happened at the Breslin Center. Before we start the discussion, though, I did want to thank new donor Jeffrey Luderek. Thanks so much for a one-time gift via PayPal. If you want to support the show, we really appreciate it. It helps a lot. You can go to thefinalfoursontheschedule.com/support and find ways to either be a monthly donor or you can give one-time gifts via Venmo or PayPal. We also have our t-shirts finalized. We have the mock-up is on the website, or will be soon if it's not there right now when you take a look. So you can go to the finalfoursontheschedule.com and you can go to merchandise. There you can see the logo. It's pretty cool. So I'm actually looking forward to this shirt. It's actually a high-quality t-shirt too. It's green with a white logo, and all your friends, all other Spartan friends and family will want one. We can't make any guarantees. We're going to try and get an order in by the end of next week, so Friday, what's that, the 9th. Can't make any guarantees for Christmas or anything like that with all the kind of weird supply issues. That'd be our hope, but we'll just kind of see how that goes. T-shirts will be going for $25. You can obviously go to the page and just pay via PayPal, and you can just leave your address and size and quantity that you want. Also, the contest is closed for the free T-shirt. There was one person who signed up maybe 8 weeks ago, and I apologize, I lost your picks. I've been looking in all the email folders, and you know how it is sometimes. They just kind of gets lost. So if that was you, and you're one of the first ones to jump on the bandwagon to get onto the contest, please send me your picks, and you'll still be added. And then also, finally, Mike Garland has recently retired assistant head coach, will be joining us after the post-game, after the Penn State game, and hopefully we'll be discussing a victory. And so, Rod, I was there, and the one good thing I can say about the game is the heckler wasn't there today, so that actually made it a lot more enjoyable because, boy, he would have made that game even more painful, especially at the end with, I could only imagine how many times he's screaming for more fouls. It was a weird game because I have no wireless, and so, I think Northwestern was a good team. They played good defense. They obviously scored a lot and shot a lot better than we probably expected when we talked to the pregame show. And when I look at the statistics in the arena, I see 3-point shooting is about the same. Actually, their 3-point shooting is a little bit worse than ours. The overall field goal percentage is the same. Rebounds were the same. We had basically the same amount of turnovers, same amount of blocks. And then there's a disparity in the score of 7 or 8 points. And I couldn't understand until after the game. We were going back and I was listening to the post-game show where they had twice as many free throws, which was obviously the main difference in the game. It felt like they were shooting more free throws, but it wasn't like they were getting a lot of extra calls. I didn't feel like it seemed like it was mainly because we were out of position on defense. And I think, if anything that this one game shows, Northwestern is not a great team. I don't think we're going to look back and say, wow, they lost. Northwestern really surprised a lot of people. I think they're an okay team, but it shows you it's not easy even going 500 in this league this season. I think, there are, you can see Northwestern or Nebraska going into Creighton and beating Creighton on their home court, which is weird.
Yep.
It's going to be it's going to be a tough year, and not having Malik Hall, I think, affects us more than I probably appreciated, especially the defensive end.
Agreed.
Because there are just so many problems. And I don't know, that you can't sugarcoat this one. You can't explain it away to scheduling or any of this sort of things. It's not like Northwestern shot 65% or something from three. They weren't amazing. We just couldn't stop their ball screens. I felt like it's the main problem on defense.
Yeah. And that was surprising to me, but I'll get into why. A very, very disheartening loss. Let's put it that way. It's the first time this year that they've lost a game, and I'm really bothered by it. And if I'm bothered by it, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Where's Tom Izzo at? The game was lost defensively. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And you hit on exactly why. If you look at the field goal percentage stuff, if you're really playing Michigan State defense, Northwestern shouldn't break 40% on you overall. So that was a little higher than you'd want, but that wasn't a disaster. They didn't burn the nets up from three, although I will say the ones they hit were extremely poorly guarded. Let's put it that way. Michigan State there were many times where they were just simply not executing the way you need to, especially when you know that this team, as we talked about, is so guard dependent for their offense. I mean, look at the three guys in double digits were their three guards. It's not a surprise. Yeah. We knew it. But the fundamental problem was, and you have to put this into the equation with the field goal percentage stuff, because otherwise you're not getting a true picture. Northwestern, a team that averages 12 free throw attempts a game, I believe I don't have the stats in front of me, I believe had 24.
They were 21 of 24.
Yeah. So double the number of free throws they typically attempt. Now, give them some credit, because I think they were more aggressive. The two times I've seen them, I saw a little bit of their game against Auburn, and then I saw a lot of their absolute debacle against Pitt. And in neither of those games were they this aggressive. So I'll give it to them for that. But mostly, that's a Michigan State problem. Michigan State could not keep their guards away from the rim. And Northwestern was consistently able to draw fouls with that. Now, I will say this. Izzo in his post-game comments talked about Michigan State getting out-toughed, and I agree with that. That said, that officiating crew, I don't think made mistakes as much as they let a lot of stuff go that I think they probably shouldn't have. Michigan State in the second half, and this is not to excuse any of it, but there was a lot of contact on stuff at the rim that in my mind should have been called and wasn't. Yeah. Now, the other end of that is they were pretty consistent in that. And I'm not saying what I'm talking about is an excuse for the disparity. Northwestern was the more consistently aggressive team, therefore they got the benefit of whatever fouls were called. But that was a very physical game, and I don't think it was officiated the way I would normally expect a very physical game to be officiated, and I think that hurt Michigan State. But again, no excuses. You have to adjust to that as a team. I'm just describing it rather than saying, well, that's blame. There's blame there. I'll give you a good example. The last Hoggard bucket, which I think is what cut it to 1, that was a foul. Yeah. It was clear. I mean, and you were in the arena. I was watching at home. It's a foul. The guy, you could talk and chant principle of verticality as much as you want. Sorry, the kid came across the lane, bumped him with his chest. That's a foul. It just is. And they didn't call it. Okay, I can be upset about that, but then I have to keep in mind they've been consistent with that. The fouls that Michigan State tended to get called for, most of those I don't think were very questionable. So, you could say, well, Michigan State didn't do as good a job of walking to that borderline between physicality and fouling as Northwestern did. And maybe that's where the truth lies. But regardless, Michigan State's inability to keep Northwestern out of the lane and continue to foul them killed them. Absolutely killed them. We talked about in the pregame having that this was a game that it looked like there might be the possibility of having more opportunities to score, because you figure you'd have a little edge on the boards, maybe an edge in turnovers. As it turned out, those areas were pretty much even, between the two. Michigan State slight advantage on the boards, Northwestern slight advantage in turnovers. But the real difference in terms of opportunities to score was Northwestern's ability to get to the line. And then, again, to their credit, 21-24. They didn't leave many points out there. They hit, when, no offense to Matt Nicholson, I've heard he's a great kid. Played at Clarkson and all that. But yeah, when he's going, I think he went 4 for 4. The first one of which was banked. It's not your night. It's just not your night. So it wasn't all, Bouie shot a load of free throws, but it wasn't all 24 from him. I think he went 9 for 9. And so that was the ball game. It was that, but I also want to turn to something. And again, you didn't have the benefit of watching the broadcast. I did. So there was something, and I would imagine many of our listeners did. There was something in that broadcast that I've got to speak to, because it was such hackery on the part of the broadcast team and Stephen Bardo, who's the color guy. And I normally think, I think Stephen Bardo on balance is pretty okay. I don't think he's the best. I don't think he's terrible. But there's this, it's said so often in broadcast now that it's become kind of a joke. It's a cliche. We would say they don't need a 3 here, right? You hear that? Yeah. How many times do you hear that? Okay. Michigan State's last real possession, 24 seconds left, down 3 after, I believe it was after Bouie got that, hit that shot, right? Which I'll get back to, because that was an example of where the problems were defensively. But Michigan State has the ball, 24 seconds left. You're down 3. You have an opportunity to tie the game. The issue there was Michigan State had only committed 4 fouls in the second half. Now, they getting back to the free throw thing, they must have all been shooting fouls at that point. Because Northwestern was still getting free throws, but they weren't anywhere near being in the bonus, is my point. When that is the situation, no, you need to take a 3, in my opinion, because even if you say the usual logic is, hey, if you score quickly with a 2, then you can defend hard. Maybe you generate a turnover. And if not, you foul them and, it becomes a free throw shooting contest. You lengthen the game. Not the situation here. Michigan State needed to commit 3 more fouls to put Northwestern in a 1-and-1. So Stephen Bardo's line, the play-by-play guy asked him, and that was his line. It's this usual, no, I don't think they need a 3. They should go A.J. Hoggard going to the rim. That's the play in my mind. And I could scarcely believe that I'm hearing it. You have to be, now I'm saying all this, not just to bag on Stephen Bardo. I am going to assume, because Michigan State has a Hall of Fame head coach, that it was expressed to his team what the situation was. But assuming that, his 5th-year senior, Joey Hauser, did not get the message. Because Joey Hauser ended up with the ball in the corner, if you recall. And Chase Audige was kind of in the area, but not locked on him. Joey Hauser had 2 legitimate choices in that moment. I think there were like 12 or 13 seconds left, something like that. Maybe a little more even, maybe 14. His choices were, 1, take the 3. And I think he had an opportunity. If he had been in a ready to shoot situation and had gone up with it upon receiving the pass. It would have been semi-contested because, as I said, Audige was still in the area, but Joey could have got it was at least a semi-clean look. And frankly, when you're in that situation, sometimes that's the best you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Or he could have chosen to pass it and keep the possession alive. The only poor decision is the one he made, which was to attempt to go to the rim. He misses the shot. Northwestern gets the rebound, and they get fouled, and that's ball game. You can't have that, because exactly what happened is the reason why you can't have that. He goes in, takes a shot, misses it. Even if he'd hit it, it would have been a disaster, because then Michigan State is still down 1, but you have 14 seconds, 13 seconds left, and they've got to commit 3 fouls to get Northwestern into the penalty and shooting free throws. That's just not how you play that situation. So I have to put the responsibility on Joey Hauser. You have to be smarter. You are a veteran. You have to know situations. And I mean, that may strike people as a little strong, but hey, it's big time college athletics. So to me, that was a massive mistake in a moment where Michigan State still had a chance to lengthen this game, and just the absolute wrong decisions being made across the board. I can take that as an example of what the problem was in general. A lot of bad decisions. So that one, I just wanted to get that off my chest, because this has become this mantra of you don't need a 3 has become such a cliche. I mean, what it reminded me of is, if you recall last year in the NCAA tournament game, the second round game, the MSU lost to Duke. Duke was in that situation, and for a minute, it looked like it was going to bite them. They had only committed, I think, 3 or 4 fouls at the under 4 timeout. And I remember being very well aware of it, thinking, hey, they've got a problem. Now, as it turned out, they ended up winning the game. It didn't come into play, but the point is, it could have. You're always grateful to not be committing a bunch of fouls, but man, in a tight game, when you're on the downside of it, that's a bad spot to be in. And that is exactly where Michigan State was. And it has to dictate how you look at a possession with 24 seconds left in the game. It has to, and I don't care. They could have scored with 21 seconds left on the clock, scored a 2, and I'd still have felt that way, because of the situation they were going to be in to try to get Northwestern to the free throw line. So anyway, I've got that off my chest. I don't know how that came off in the arena, but on the broadcast, I could scarcely believe what I was hearing on the one hand. Then on the other, I've heard announcers utter this stupid cliche so many times I shouldn't be surprised. Except it's an ex-player. Shouldn't Stephen Bardo be able to look at what I looked at and realize, oh no, that's not going to work here? Anyway, the possession.
I was a dumb guy in the stands, and I didn't even realize that we only committed that many fouls, because it felt like they were on the line quite a bit. That's why I was surprised that there were only 4 fouls committed.
All 4 fouls. So, I could go back and look, but I'm going to guess at least 3 of the 4 fouls they committed up to that point had to be shooting fouls, because Northwestern they were shooting free throws a lot. I also want to go back to the possession before that, the one that Bouie scored to make it a 3-point game. That was the essence of the problem tonight, and not the only problem, but the most important part in my mind. And you said it. Ball screen defense. I had been told by someone who would know that Izzo, off the record, said to a media member yesterday how Mady Sissoko had been fantastic in practice on ball screen defense. Just fantastic. Executing perfectly, reading it, reactions were where they needed to be, all of it. On that possession, and it wasn't the only time it happened, Bouie won that possession by beating Mady Sissoko. Mm-hmm. And look, it was a great play. It was a tough make. because the kid is gliding across the rim. It was not an easy conversion. I don't want to pretend it was, but it happened because he beat Mady Sissoko at the point of attack. And Michigan State was really, really bad at the point of attack in ball screen defense tonight, in my opinion. And with Mady, it's frustrating because we have seen entire games where he's been very, very good in that area. And then we've seen some where he hasn't been. Tonight was an example of the latter, and it absolutely killed them. You know, you should be able to contain better than Michigan State did tonight. And it just didn't happen. And it really ended up biting them on that particular possession with the game kind of in the balance where they need a stop. They've just got to have one stop. And you knew what was coming. I would imagine you felt you knew sitting in the stands.
Yeah.
Bouie's going to get this shot come hell or high water. And so your job as a defender is you make sure the shot he takes is a shitty one. And they didn't do it. So that to me is the essence of where it was lost. It was there.
Yeah, and I would say too, the other point was, it was a 4-point lead for Northwestern with maybe 2 minutes left or 3 minutes left, and we had 4 straight stops on defense
and couldn't score.
And 4 empty possessions. I mean, and one was there were some great looks, like a 3 that just missed, like I want to say in transition, I think, and there's another 2 that looked like it was, I think it was a layup or something. There were a couple of those that were really good possessions, and I'm going to differ with you there. I'm going to differ with you there, and here's why. Maybe I misremember.
Here's why. As the game got into like the last 8 minutes or so, where was Michigan State at their best? I'll ask you. What was working for them offensively?
Well, the best part of the game is when they had any sort of transition going. That's certainly in the first half. They were
in the half court. Last
half court,
8 minutes or so of the game.
It was Hoggard attacking, going in, and then kicking out somewhere. Yeah,
there you go. Exactly. AJ Hoggard getting into the lane. This is another area where this team's got to grow up fast, because to me, it's an example of a lack of maturity. If you think back to Cassius Winston's junior and senior seasons, I can go back, and my favorite examples of this are the 3 games, particularly the one at Breslin where MSU beat Michigan that year. Mm-hmm. And what you will see when it's money time, and if you remember those games, MSU had to come back in all of them. So down the stretch, it was a lot like this, a lot of high pressure, high intensity possessions. Cassius Winston and Xavier Tillman would run pick and roll, and they would go back and reset and do it again 3 times, 4 times in a possession, whatever it took to finally spring him. In this game, in those possessions you're talking about, Michigan State would run it once, Northwestern would recover and defend it, and then the ball would go elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Can't have it. Not in my opinion. In my opinion, it was very clear that the way they were going to get point production down the stretch in that game was AJ Hoggard getting into the paint, period. That's where it was happening. And so to me, you do whatever you have to do in order to make that happen. And if that means you got to reset and go at it again on a pick and roll, and maybe a 3rd time, okay, so be it. But you have to do it, because nothing else, the other stuff they were running, those weren't, in my mind, they were, I mean, we differ on it. In my mind, those were wasted possessions. And yeah, guys may have gotten open or semi-open looks, but they weren't what was needed. What was needed was you get your point guard into the paint and let him either finish around the rim or kick out to a wide open shooter where you're going to get a high quality shot, one or the other. And they just didn't do it nearly enough in that stretch where you're right. They were getting defensive stops. It was all there for the taking, and they didn't take it, in my opinion, in part because of a lack of patience. And that falls I hate to say it because at times he was their best player tonight, probably was their best player. But to me, that falls on A.J. Hoggard. He is the point guard. He's the guy with the ball in his hands. He has to grab that game by the throat and say, we're sinking or swimming with me getting myself where I need to be to force the defense to collapse. And he didn't do it. He didn't do it consistently enough. So, and obviously I'm not talking about him putting his head down and doing those fullback dives, which ended disaster. I'm talking about repeatedly doing it, running that until you get sprung free. That's what a mature point guard does. And I encourage anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, go back to the last 4 minutes or so of the game at Breslin in Cassius's junior year. And that is a prime example of what I mean. You do it, you do it, you do it until you get sprung. Because nothing else, like I say, nothing else was really falling. You know, Hauser had gone cold. Tyson had been on the bench so long, I don't think you really felt great about him going and making a play. You know, it just, nothing else was going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, let's talk about AJ. We were not expecting this, but he did not start. That was
I thought that was a good move.
A message Ben's move, and I feel like AJ's game overall today was the best he's had. I don't know this season, but certainly he looked good most of the game. At least I think you're right in that he's maybe got some issues to work out as far as, you know, patience and things like that. But his attitude, his demeanor on the court, and his intensity, I thought were pretty good. There were a couple times where they weren't good, but for the most part, I thought it was a pretty good performance.
Yeah, he was their best player. No, I don't disagree. I guess what I'm saying is, because I agree, that's why I'm bothered by those possessions we were talking about.
Yeah.
You know, he needed to be the guy. In fact, he needed to be the guy on that last possession, and he wasn't. You know, you could still, even though if I were Northwestern, I'd say, look, the only thing that's a problem for us is giving up a three. But human nature being what it is, if AJ had managed to break their defense down on that last possession and gotten into the middle of the lane, I'm pretty certain some Northwestern defenders would have collapsed, and he would have been able to kick to a more open shooter than what MSU got. So even there, I would have liked to have seen it. But yeah, he did some really good things. Look, I think the whole team, give or take Jaden Akins, has a lot to be embarrassed about from a defensive perspective, though. And I don't think AJ escapes that. I mean, it might have been a better game than he's played lately, but the only guy who really stuck out to me defensively was Jaden Akins. Everybody else I thought was substandard. But overall, yeah, AJ was the best they had today.
And I think, you know, Tyson Walker getting that fourth foul, I mean, that for
really hurt
guard, that's hurt. There's just no point to, I don't understand what he was doing. He was, I think, still frustrated from the offensive foul he got in the possession before, 2 possessions before. Cause even when he got that foul, he just like, he was just wanting to get out of the game. It was kind of strange. His demeanor when he came, the foul.
You know, I think his mentality is, if you remember that play, the defense broke down on a pick and roll, and Baran got the ball at the rim. And I think Tyson has, as he showed in the first half, Tyson can get up. Tyson's a better athlete than I think anybody anticipated. And I think his mentality was, and look, I'm not excusing it. Veteran guard has got to be smarter than that in that situation. But I think he was trying to make a play. I think he was frustrated by the defensive breakdown and was trying to salvage a possession. It was a bad idea. The offensive foul that came before that was a weird play. And again, I don't know how much of it stood out live, but the reason he got called for it is it seemed as if his hand, he was kind of pushing the defender down, but the defender was falling. I don't know how much of that. I can understand why it was called because of the way that it looked. I don't know if it was actually much, if any, contact, but whatever. It was called. You're in that situation. And yeah, it did hurt Michigan State because up to that point in the game, I think he was settling in, and I think he had 6 points at that stage, but it felt like, to me at least, that he was their most dynamic guy offensively and was the guy was, because AJ really hadn't picked it up scoring wise as of that point. That came after Tyson went to the bench. But yeah, it definitely hurt them because you end up, I mean, I don't know how many minutes Jaden Akins played, but I'll guarantee it was more than they were anticipating.
22.
Yeah, they were Izzo was talking about 15 in the pregame. So he played him a lot. Trey Holloman played a little more than he has been. You're definitely playing Pierre Brooks a lot. And look, I mean, Pierre hit some threes, but he was also one of the cast of thousands who was pretty bad defensively.
Yeah.
And going in, that's the equation. Until he starts figuring it out, you can count on blown tires, poor recognition, poor understanding, all of that, amplifying the fact that he's not an athletically gifted guy to begin with on defense. So, yeah, I think that was definitely a critical stage in the game. The other thing too is, although I don't think Tyson was great defensively either, I do think he was the guy that was the best answer overall for Bouie. Mm-hmm. And with him out of the game, that's, it wasn't. And I say that mostly because he's the guy I'm most confident in terms of getting up over the top of screens, which is what you have to do with Bouie. Because if you don't, he'll just pull and he can hurt you. When Tyson's not in there, you were asking, AJ or sometimes Trey Holloman and to do that. And that's just not as good a bet. So it definitely, I agree. It definitely hurt them.
Yeah. And I think the other turning point in the game was in the first half. Michigan State had a lead, 5 to 7 points to sometimes down to 3. And then when Sissoko left, his ball screen defense wasn't great, but boy, they really struggled with Kohler. And then they tried a little turn with Cooper, and they just couldn't do it. It was I
highlighted Mahdi because of that last play, and it certainly wasn't the only one that he struggled in. But you're absolutely right; they were much worse with the 2 freshmen in there. Mahdi's part of the reason I'm emphasizing that is Mahdi's got to be good, because when he's not in there, it's tough. And I'm going to say this, and again, it's not an excuse. It's just a statement of fact. The stats tell the story. The 4 games that Michigan State was at full strength, and so Malik Call was playing, Michigan State was doing a very good job defensively. They were holding opponent, and keep in mind, they played Gonzaga, they played Kentucky, and they played Villanova. Now, you could say none of those teams is what we've come to expect them to be in recent years, but I assure you, every one of those teams I just mentioned has much more in the way of offensive weapons than, say, Northwestern has.
Yeah.
And Michigan State was holding those teams under 40% from the floor. They were absolutely shutting people down from 3. And that is gone now. And I think getting Jaden Akins back, look, Jaden, it's going to take some time for him to get fully back up to speed. I think this, start, stop thing has done him no favors.
Yeah.
But in my eyes, he was the only guy whose defense I actually liked tonight. So I think his presence is going to help there. But boy, are they missing Malik Call in a host of ways. And I don't know. I mean, I guess you've just got to survive this. You got to try and survive it, get him back, get him reacclimated, and you hope by the first of the year, you're in a position where, he's able to be the guy that he was in those first 4 games, and Michigan State can get back to defending the way that they were. Because right now, they are a pretty bad defensive team, and that's after those first 4 games. They were, in my mind, a very good one. So what's the common denominator?
Sure. You worry though, because Michigan State looked like a really good defense team last season, and then Bingham was never quite the same, and the team just never was the same. So, you can have it going and then just lose that mojo. But there's obviously, to your point, there's a guy missing and he's a good defender. So there's every reason to think
and there's a domino effect too, because if Malik Hall is there, that means other guys aren't playing in those situations. So not only are you getting a guy who's a better defender, who understands what you're trying to do better and can execute it better, but some guys at least, who are really struggling. Izzo made a comment about how, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'll try to paraphrase this. The other day in a post-practice interview, I saw him say something to the effect of, it's that the guy who's making the mistake it's not just his mistake, it has a knock-on effect, because other guys then, even guys who might actually be good defenders or who might be in the right position at a given moment, have to try to help, and they get worse. Whereas a guy who does his job makes it easier for everybody else around him. It's not just a simple 1-for-1 swap out. It has more profound effects than that. Now, you raise a legitimate point. It has to be Malik Hall back to the Malik Hall we saw in those 4 games, and we don't know yet what it's going to look like. But I can tell you right now, that's the only thing that's really got me holding on to much hope, because if this is going to be it, what we saw tonight and what we saw in South Bend, but far more troubling what we saw tonight, they're not winning very much. They're not, because they don't have the kind of massive offensive horsepower to overcome that. They've got to be able to check. And if you can do that, I mean, you need no better illustration of this than looking at the other team on the floor tonight. Northwestern's offensive numbers, absent the free throw line stuff, were not great. I don't think that's a particularly good offensive team. I really don't. Even considering what those guards did, if you look at their shooting numbers from 3, they were not good overall.
Yeah.
How did they win? They guarded. they guarded. I think that's obviously the free throw line helped too. But I think the bigger deal is, all that aside, Michigan State could have still won this game if Northwestern came out and didn't defend. But they did defend, and they made it very difficult on Michigan State to run their stuff. And so Michigan State has to take a page from that book and say, we've got to become hard to play against. Because without that in the equation, I don't know that there's a good future in store. I mean, I'm not nearly on the ledge enough to be talking about tournament bids or any of that nonsense. But look, it's early December, and this is a data point, and it's not a good one.
You look at this team, and I guess, with Malik Hall out, they've got to figure out a way to win. And you've seen this many times in Michigan State, where you have an offense team that's maybe not great. They have struggled in the half court sometimes, but they bring the defense. They win some games that you feel like they had no business winning, and you just aren't seeing that right now. And I mean, my fear a little bit is that, you're going to get Malik back before Christmas, if everything's on timetable straight, but you're really not getting Malik, you wouldn't think, until second week of January, maybe third, where he's probably fully acclimated back into shape.
Yeah,
and
it's
generally
guesswork.
what you see. Yeah, I mean,
you're probably right, but it's guesswork. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go through the 5 keys. Well, I guess unless you have something else to add.
No, I was just going to say, as I repeat something I said a few minutes ago, they got to survive this somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. Survival is key. So I don't think we really need to talk about the first key of the game, which was defense. I mean, I think that we kind of talked about that plenty.
Yeah.
It wasn't good. Second, transition. I did think that when we got stuff going in offense, it was through transition. Now you look at fast break points on the Michigan State website, and Northwestern had, I think, 15 fast break points, Michigan State 9. I think that seemed right. But I mean, because there were a lot of secondary transition buckets we got, but Northwestern got a lot of easy layups, especially second half and some.
Yeah.
It's funny, like our turnovers are ones that really just were disastrous ones, which again, it seems to be a trend. When we have turnovers, they're really bad ones because, we turned over 12, 13 times and they had 19 points off. They had 13 points off 13 turnovers. So they had a point off a turnover. I was going to say they had 15 fast break points. Those are mainly just off turnovers.
It was, look, I think that what we talked about in the pregame was you need to try to play in transition as much as you can because going against this team in the half court might be a struggle. Well, what we see, I don't think they did enough. I'd give Northwestern credit for a lot of that. But I don't think Michigan State, we're oriented to the Michigan State side of the equation. So the way I'm going to view it is whatever the reasoning, Michigan State did not do enough to make it easier on themselves offensively.
Yeah, and number 3 is perimeter shooting. We had 8 threes. We were 8 for 22.
Yeah, not terrible.
It was not terrible, not great. There were a couple open looks that certainly should have fallen. A couple of more crazy ones with the shot clock running out, which is a defective offensive set.
I kind of removed those from the equation. I will actually say, I think Michigan State did enough there. That to me is not an area where I look at it and say, well, they lost the game there. Not the case. They shot well enough from 3. Yeah, you'd like some of those ones late to fall, but overall, I can't say that when you shoot whatever it was, 36, 37% from 3, that was a big contributor to the loss. We just said what I remember saying in the pregame was if MSU has like a 3 for 20 type night,
4 for 20, yeah, right.
Didn't happen.
Yeah, they definitely hit enough. And then 4th is turnovers. We thought Michigan State might have an edge. It was pretty clear early on in the game. I turned to my wife and said, well, we're not going to have an edge here because I think it was like 2-2 or 3-3 and turnovers. And then again, I feel like a lot of our turnovers were just led to buckets the other way, especially more later in the game. I don't know. I mean, there was no edge there, certainly.
It wasn't a disaster. I think it was 13-12. MSU had 13, Northwestern had 12. But one thing that I did mention and is part of what I think you're talking about. Remember that we discussed Northwestern defensively being fairly highly ranked in terms of turnover percentage, meaning their opponents are coughing the ball up a lot. And they were number 42 in the country coming in steal percentage. Now, I don't know if they finished with this, but there was a point with a decent amount of clock left that they had 9 steals. Do you have the steals stat in front of you?
They of our 13 turnovers, 10 were steals.
There you go. That is something. So those of you who have had problems with the lackadaisical or unforced errors that Michigan State seems to have over the years, you're not seeing it this year. No. And you didn't really see it tonight. But what you did see was a Northwestern team that was pretty aggressive, and Michigan State was just not strong enough with the ball. Some of those, give them credit for making a play, but it was mostly on Michigan State making a bad decision, and you're right. I think they punished Michigan State with a high enough level of frequency that for those mistakes that it made a difference.
Yeah, and finally, rebounding. So rebounding, we were out-rebounded by 1, 31-30. I think that's mainly because at the end of the game where we had a number of misses. But offensive rebounding, Michigan State finished with
6, I think.
8 offensive rebounds. So 8 off of 22 misses, 32 misses.
So 25%.
25%. It's not very good. And, Northwestern just had 6. So off of 28 misses. So, not really an edge that you'd hope to get there.
They won it, but it wasn't by enough. There's a strategic decision that has very clearly been made by Tom Izzo, and this is something we haven't spent much time talking about. But if you were watching them with even a semi-keen eye, I think you're noticing it. You remember the old mantra, the old days, 4 to the boards?
Yeah.
There are a lot of possessions. Michigan State is 0 to the boards these days.
Yeah. Yep.
They're not even competing for offensive rebounds. And it's weird. It's jarring watching it. Like I see a shot missed, and then I'm immediately struck by the fact that there are 4 opposing jerseys around the rebound and not a white or a green jersey in sight. And it's jarring. But they are not competing for offensive rebounds. They've been much better this year on the defensive boards, which we've spent some time talking about. And tonight, statistically, another good example of that. You know, they didn't give up very much, but Northwestern's not really trying to test you. I think the rubber's going to hit the road in that category when you start going up against the Purdue's and the Illinois and people like that who are actively trying to offensive rebound. We'll see how good MSU actually is on the defensive glass, but their offensive rebounding, I don't know. I mean, it may be that they're figuring with Hall and with Akins having been out or limited that it's not a smart move with the guys they're playing to be crashing very much, but they are not getting the benefit of that. On the flip side, been much better taking care of the ball. So maybe it all comes out evenly in the wash, but yeah, they had no real serious advantage on the glass to speak of tonight.
Yeah, the one advantage of getting offensive rebounds, of course, is that the defense, I think, generally out of position, right? Or you're getting a rebound close to the rim and you can put it back up. And
it's a cliche, but it's also one that it's a cliche because there's some truth to it. I believe it's been proven out statistically that as a general principle, 3-point shooters tend to be more accurate shooting off an offensive rebound and kick out than they do through the conventional flow of the offense. So I don't, if you as an observer, as someone who watches games thinks, boy, it just seems that every time a team gets an offensive rebound and they kick it out to a shooter, the shot goes. Your mind is not playing tricks with you. I think it's actually considered to be the best perimeter shot you can take. So there's that. I think, look, we don't have to go through it. People have watched this program for 25 years, and they know there's an impact that offensive rebounding has where you can demoralize an opponent. You're obviously getting multiple chances to score, which is always a good thing. And sometimes you're getting a better quality of shot, as you say, because the other team's scrambling. Michigan State is not getting much benefit from that right now in that area. That's true, clearly. I mean, they coming into this game, I think they were in the 140s in offensive rebounding percentage, which I haven't even looked, but I have to believe would be easily the lowest of Tom Izzo's tenure. When Tom Izzo had his first 2 teams that went to the NIT, those teams were good offensive rebounding teams. I mean, it's always been the case. And the last couple of years, they haven't been great, but they weren't outside the top 100. So I don't know. I don't know if it sure is looking to me like it's a conscious choice. And I haven't heard anybody ask him that question. Maybe that's something we can ask Mike Garland.
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll have, when we have him on the show, we could ask him that. I mean, we know he hangs out with Tom Izzo quite a bit. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, what this exemplifies is that this team is not super deep in the sense that you have all these players, you can just roll the ball out, right? When you lose your 2 of your best 6 players, your team is not going to function properly, and that's just the case. And as much as you want to have people come along, you're relying on freshmen or people who were basically coming in as freshmen, like even Sissoko. I mean, he's never really played, and so everyone's kind of like learning on the fly, which is not a good way to do it when you're in conference play now.
People for a long time, I've heard a complaint from MSU fans that Izzo doesn't let guys play through mistakes, and Izzo doesn't sink enough time into trying to develop young guys and let them play through it, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're getting your wish because he really doesn't have a choice. These guys are all, Sissoko, Kohler, Cooper, Holloman, Brooks, Akins. They're all part of your rotation. So they have to play. And hopefully there are lessons being learned that come February are going to pay off. That's what you hope for. And certainly, it goes without saying, you expect that they will pay off down the road in terms of next year or the year after that with these guys, But
Right.
For now, yeah, it's not pretty at times. And, the thing is, we've seen, I'll try to end this on a note of optimism. We have seen this team play well this year at full strength. We have seen it. So in my, I had really hoped they were going to find a way to squeeze out 2 wins in these 2 games, these 2 conference games, and then just, okay, put your head down, get Malik back, get those 9 days off where you could practice and work on you and all of that, and then restart the Big Ten and see where you're at. Well, clearly that's not happened. It puts a little more pressure certainly on Wednesday night going into State College,
right,
to try to get a win on the road against a Penn State team that I think is flawed, very flawed, but there are certain things they do well. And one of them that they do really well is they compete. You saw that last year with Micah Shrewsbury's team, and it's not any different this year. They are tough. They're not big, but they are tough and they compete. And so, with Izzo saying he felt like they got out tough tonight, which I'm not inclined to disagree with, they better find a reservoir of toughness soon, because they're going to need it if they're going to come out of State College with a win. And frankly, if they don't, you're off to an 0-2 start in the league. Yeah, it's not the end of the world, but it's a whole lot of not good.
Yeah, I think losing one at home to any team, much less Northwestern. I mean, you can't protect home court. You've got to steal some on the road now, and even when at Penn State counts. And so,
no, it's not. This doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world. I mean, I can go back Draymond Green's senior year where they won a share of the Big Ten title. They lost at home to Northwestern. It's happened before, but we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about, getting your team in a spot where you can count on them game in, game out. That's what's frustrating about it is the Notre Dame game. Okay, there were reasons, and I buy that completely. But this one coming on the heels of that, what it does for me as I look at this is and I don't blame anybody else for feeling this way too, is it starts conjuring up feelings of the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Where you feel like, I don't know. We are so spoiled as Michigan State fans that for the most part, over the last quarter century, you have had a pretty good idea game in, game out, what you were going to see. Might not always be a win, but you knew certain things were going to happen. You knew that the odds were very strong that Michigan State was going to play at a certain level of competency with a certain level of toughness, all of those things, right? The last 2 years, what's probably been most disconcerting for me as a fan is that feel that you're used to has not been there. Instead, it's been wildly inconsistent. And it worries me that we're seeing some signs of that perhaps again. Maybe there are reasons. Malik Hall, Jaden Akins just coming back. Those are big reasons. But regardless, you just, speaking for myself, you want to see that consistency return where you feel like you have good reason to believe that you know what to expect out of them.
Yeah.
And right now, there's reason to wonder about that.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I felt like the first 4 games we had that, where we kind of felt
it was a good start.
Team, 4 straight games we saw the same team.
But let's not forget that I think people have forgotten this. Each of the 2 previous years, Michigan State got off to good starts. Last year, they were ranked going back and in good position. Go back, it wasn't even January. They won, I think they were 4-0 or 5-0 in the league to start. And then the roof kind of caved in a bit. The year before, they had those blowout win over Notre Dame at home. They beat Duke soundly at Cameron. you know, and all of a sudden people think, oh, this team is going to be pretty good. And then again, the roof caved in. So we have seen this before lately. So that's the charge that this team has, I think, is to not let that spiral into this pattern of inconsistency, but instead find that level again. And it'll be a lot easier to accomplish that when they get Malik Hall back.
Yeah, well, we'll see if they've got that senior leadership that you hope they'd have with as many seniors they have, and if they can turn that around.
And that's what's frustrating about this is they've got veterans. They've got guys who have played a lot. A.J. Hoggard, Tyson Walker, Joey Hauser. These guys have played a lot of basketball. There's just that was frustrating to me about that spate of possessions where A.J. didn't do the one thing that's been working and the decision Joey Hauser makes there at the end. That's why it's really frustrating. It wasn't Jackson Kohler out there making a mistake. It wasn't Trey Holloman making a mistake. It was your veterans, your leaders. Can't have it.
Well, we'll be back in a day or so and have a pregame for the Penn State game, and hopefully Michigan State can bounce back from this loss to Northwestern Wildcats. I don't know what else to say except if you do want to check out, get a T-shirt for the show, they are pretty cool. Go ahead and go to our website, and I hope to have it up in a day or so. So maybe by the next time you check it out on Monday or Tuesday, it'll be there. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.
Are you tired of waiting for your Cyber Week purchases to show up in the mail?
3 business days? No!
At McDonald's, we've got a deal you can enjoy right now. Get a free medium fries and medium drink with purchase of a Big Mac or Quarter Pounder with cheese. And check the app daily for more deals. It's the closest thing to actually downloading a burger. Offer valid through December 31st at participating McDonald's. Valid once per day. McDonald's app download and registration required.